New Year's Eve, Tokyo. The year 2000 is just hours away. In the quiet residential neighborhood of Setagaya, families are preparing for celebrations. Children are falling asleep. Fireworks are being planned. And in one small house on a modest street, something has already gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. The Miyazawa family, a father, a mother, a 6-year-old daughter, and an 8-year-old son, are gone. But the man responsible for what happened to them, he isn't gone. He's still there. Right now, in the early hours of the new millennium, while Tokyo celebrates and fireworks bloom over the skyline, a stranger is sitting inside that house. He has helped himself to ice cream from the freezer. He has brewed tea. He has sat at the family's computer and browsed the internet. He has treated his own wounds using their first aid kit. He has, at some point, lain down on their sofa and slept. Why? That is the question that has haunted Japan for over 2 decades. And to this day, no one has the answer. Welcome back. If you're new here, you found the right place. We cover the cases that keep investigators awake at night, stories from around the world that reveal something deeply unsettling about human nature. Today's case is one of the most baffling, unsolved crimes in modern history. We're going to talk about a killer who left behind his DNA, his clothes, his weapon, and his footprints, and still vanished without a trace. We're going to talk about a detail found in that house that suggests the perpetrator may not have been Japanese at all. And we're going to sit with the most disturbing question at the heart of this case. What was he doing in there for 10 hours? If this kind of deep dive investigation is what you're here for, hit subscribe before we go any further and stay until the end, because this case has a detail in the final act that will genuinely change how you think about it. Let's begin. To understand the Setagaya case, you need to understand Setagaya. It is one of Tokyo's most peaceful, affluent residential wards. Think tree-lined streets, modest but well-kept homes, children cycling to school, neighbors who know each other's names. In a city of nearly 14 million people, Setagaya has always felt like an exhale, a place where the chaos of Tokyo's center fades into something quieter, safer, ordinary. Japan, more broadly, has one of the lowest violent crime rates of any developed nation on Earth. In 2000, the idea of a random, violent home invasion in a neighborhood like Setagaya wasn't just unlikely, it was almost culturally inconceivable. Japan takes extraordinary pride in its public safety. Doors are often left unlocked. Children walk to school alone. Trust in the community is not just a sentiment. It is a foundational part of daily life. This is the world the Miyazawa family lived in, and this is precisely why what happened to them cut so deeply, not just into their community, but into Japan's sense of itself. Mikio Miyazawa was 44 years old. He worked in the imported goods industry, and by all accounts, was a dedicated, quietly cheerful man. His wife, Yasuko, was 41. Their children, 8-year-old Nichise and 6-year-old Rei, were by every description that survives them, ordinary and beloved kids, living an ordinary and beloved life. They had decorated their home for the holidays. There were plans for the new year. There were things to look forward to. That is the world that existed before the evening of December 30th, 2000. That is the world that ended before anyone in Tokyo had finished celebrating. What investigators pieced together in the aftermath was this. Sometime in the evening hours of December 30th, 2000, an unknown individual entered the Miyazawa family home. The exact point of entry was never definitively established, though evidence suggested the killer may have come through the garden. The family was inside. What followed was swift and catastrophic. All 4 members of the Miyazawa family, Mikio, Yasuko, Nichise, and little Rei, were taken. But what the perpetrator did next is where this case departs from every framework of understanding that investigators had. He stayed, not for minutes, not out of panic or confusion. The forensic evidence, food consumed, computer activity, the state of the rooms, strongly suggests that the killer remained inside the Miyazawa home for somewhere between 6 and 10 hours after the family had been taken from it. He opened the freezer. He removed a carton of ice cream and ate from it, leaving the spoon inside. He made himself tea. He sat at the family's personal computer and browsed the internet. Investigators were able to recover browsing history, though it led them into one of the most frustrating dead ends of the entire case. He used the family's first aid kit to treat wounds on his own hand. Wounds, investigators believed, that he sustained during the attack. He changed his clothes, leaving his own garments folded or discarded in the home. At some point, evidence suggested he may have slept. And then, as the city woke up on New Year's Eve morning and the crowds began to fill the streets for the holiday, he simply walked out into a city of millions, and he was never seen again. The family was discovered the following day, December 31st, by Yasuko's brother, who had come to visit for the new year. He found the door unlocked. He found the house in a state that was neither entirely ransacked nor entirely normal, and he found what no family member should ever have to find. Police arrived within the hour, and from that moment forward, one of the longest, most expensive, and most haunting investigations in Japanese criminal history began. What investigators found inside the Miyazawa home was, on one hand, an extraordinary gift. The perpetrator had left behind an almost absurd volume of physical evidence. His DNA was recovered from multiple locations throughout the house, including from the ice cream carton, from discarded clothing, from biological traces near where he had treated his wounds. His fingerprints were found. The clothing he left behind was examined in meticulous detail. His shoe size was determined. Physical characteristics were extrapolated. A profile emerged. A male, likely in his 30s, of medium build. And then, the detail that would redirect the entire investigation. The clothing the killer left behind was not Japanese. The brands, the sizing, the labels, they pointed toward an origin outside Japan. Some items appeared to originate from the United States or Europe. The stitching, the cut, the style, all of it suggested someone who had come from or had significant connection to somewhere else, combined with the browsing history recovered from the Miyazawa family's computer, which included sites in foreign languages and search behavior that didn't fit standard Japanese internet use patterns. Of that era, investigators began to entertain a theory that had no precedent in Japanese criminal history. The killer might not be Japanese. This opened the investigation into international territory. DNA was cross-referenced against databases in multiple countries. Interpol was engaged. The case drew attention from law enforcement, agencies far beyond Japan's borders. And yet, nothing. The DNA profile recovered from the Miyazawa home does not match any individual in any known criminal database. As of today, it remains unmatched. The killer has left the most intimate possible evidence of his existence. And yet he remains, to investigators, a ghost. The case was never officially closed. Japan has no statute of limitations on cases involving the taking of a life. Setagaya police have maintained an active investigative team on this case for over 20 years. The reward offered for information has grown substantially over that time. Witnesses were sought. Tips poured in from across Japan and abroad, thousands of them. Each one was followed. Each one ultimately led nowhere. In 2012, investigators announced they had narrowed down the DNA to suggest possible ancestry from a region spanning parts of East or Southeast Asia, though this was qualified heavily as genetic ancestry analysis. At that resolution carries significant margin for error. It was, for the families and the investigators, both a development and a reminder of just how far they still were from the truth. Here is where the case becomes something more than a mystery. Here is where it becomes a psychological portrait and a deeply uncomfortable one. Consider what we know about those 10 hours. The perpetrator was wounded. The evidence of him treating his own hand suggests the attack was not clean, not detached. He bled, or rather, traces of red were found in the very home where he had just ended 4 lives. He was in pain. He was, by any rational assessment, in danger. Every minute he stayed increased his risk of discovery, and yet he stayed. He ate, he rested, he browsed the internet. Comfort. That is the word investigators and criminal psychologists kept returning to. The behavior inside that house was not the behavior of panic. It was not the behavior of someone paralyzed by shock. It was the behavior of someone who felt, in some deeply disturbing way, at ease. One theory, and investigators are careful to frame this as theory, is that the perpetrator had surveilled the family extensively beforehand, that he had, in some psychological sense, already claimed the space as familiar. That lingering there afterward was not aberrant behavior within his own internal framework. It was, in some terrible way, intentional. Another theory is more clinical. The individual may have exhibited traits consistent with certain psychological profiles that do not map onto what most of us would recognize as normal risk assessment, normal remorse, or normal fear. But here is the twist that tends to stop people cold. Among the items left behind in the home, investigators found a backpack. Inside the backpack were personal items, items that appeared to belong to the perpetrator, and among those items were what appeared to be children's gloves. Not adult gloves, children's gloves. Whether they belonged to the perpetrator, were taken as some kind of trophy, or represented something else entirely. Investigators have never been able to say definitively, but the presence of those gloves in the bag of a man who had just taken the lives of 2 children is the detail that criminal psychologists have found most disturbing and most revealing. It suggests premeditation. It suggests methodology. It suggests, above all, that whoever this person was, this was not his first time thinking about something like this. And yet, no match, no name, no face. The Setagaya Family Case remains unsolved. As of 2025, it is one of the longest-running active homicide investigations in Japanese history. The DNA sits in a database, waiting. The clothing has been analyzed and reanalyzed. New forensic technologies are applied as they become available. Investigators have said publicly and repeatedly they haven't given up. Yasuko's family, the relatives who survived, who found them, who have spent over 2 decades without answers, have spoken publicly about what this limbo does to a person, what it means to grieve someone fully while justice remains entirely out of reach. Japan, a country that built its national identity, in part on the idea of safety, of community trust, of collective care for one another, has never quite processed what this case represents. A stranger walked into a family's home. He ended 4 lives. He sat among their belongings, ate their food, and left. And no system, no database, no investigation, no technology has been able to reach him. The question that lingers, the one that no resolution will ever fully quiet, is not just who he was, it is where he went, whether he has lived quietly somewhere in the world for the past 25 years, carrying this with him, whether he has done this again, somewhere, in some form, and simply never been connected back to that small house in Setagaya, Mikio, Yasuko, Nichisei, Rei. They deserved better than what happened to them. They deserved better than what has followed. I want to know what you think, and I mean specifically, the detail that stays with me is the 10 hours, not the evidence left behind, not even the DNA, the choice to stay. So, here's my question for you. Do you think the Setagaya killer's behavior afterward was calculated, a kind of psychological signature? Or do you think it points to something more disordered, someone acting without full awareness of reality? Leave your theory in the comments. I read every single one. If this case is new to you, please subscribe. We cover international true crime stories that rarely make it into English language media, and this is exactly the kind of channel you'll want to have found before the next one drops. Next time, we're going somewhere even darker, a case where the investigation itself became the crime. Stay close until then.